Hi, everybody. My name is Dubois, and I joined Mojo as a technical writer about 3 months ago. And so today we're talking about some of the updates and progress we've made for the documentation workstream. And to get us started, I will be talking about the overarching vision. So one of the things that was really important when I joined Mojo was so one of the things that was really important when I joined Mojo, especially as it had to do with the documentation, was having a clear vision of what we wanted to achieve. And so the vision we came up with for the documentation was documentation as a product. And what that means for us is being able to create documentation that encourages our users and different personas to adopt Mojo. And so as part of that, the focus areas for the new documentation is about content layout and architecture, and I'll talk through some of this. So one of the things we cared about was ensuring that the new documentation presented content in consumable chunks. So rather than having this huge deluge of information presented at once, it was presented to users, to different personas in manageable and consumable chunks. And then ease of navigation between different sections of the documentation, well-connected content across the different documentation pages, and I'll talk more about this in a bit. And then support for versioning. So we think having the version documentation is really important for Mojo, and especially for all of our APIs. And then on the user experience side of things, we cared about clear calls to action on all of the pages, consistent voice and user-focused messaging. And I will show some examples of the work we've done for some of these things in a bit. And then uniform design theme in line with the Mojo brand. And so to help us achieve this, we came up with what we called a modular documentation 2.0 architecture. So this document details all of the different documentation pages for Mojo and how they all connect. And so this became like a design guide and a single source of truth for all of the work we started doing on the documentation. And I say we because I was not the only one working on it. There's Louis who was also doing support, and Sam and Singam. So this is what the new documentation, the structure architecture for the new documentation. And you can see that at the top level, we have the navigation, getting started, community. So we sectioned all of the documentation into these different columns. And the getting started, the community, the API, the technical, and the training programs. And just to quickly touch on some of this part. So under the getting started, you can see where we came up with the quick starts. And in each of the quick starts, there's some integration with the sandbox, because in line with the goal for ease of navigation and being able to find content easily on the documentation, we thought it was important to integrate some of these pieces together. And this, like I mentioned, became the guide for all of the work we did. And so talking more specifically about some of the progress we made for PI 14, we succeeded in migrating the community documentation to ViewPress from Gitbooks, which is what we're using currently. And then cleaned up and restructured the community documentation in line with the architecture we defined. The support for versioning has been implemented, and we deployed a preview version of the documentation. So there is a link I'll share at the end of this presentation, or I can put somewhere in the chat so you can go see. It's an initial draft. It's still a preview version of what modular documentation 2.0 looks like. So here's the current documentation as we know it. And for most of us who have interacted with this, you can tell that the moment you get to this page, it looks like a lot of information coming through at once. And that was one of the things I mentioned during my assessment of the existing documentation. And so we redesigned the landing page for modular documentation to this. And so with this, we have And you can see some of the things I've highlighted here. There is support for versioning. You can see a clear call to action for anyone who visits the documentation. So clicking on Getting Started will take you to the Getting Started section. And then at the top right, you have the navigation, which allows you to move through the different pieces of the documentation. So if you are more interested in going to APIs, you can directly go to the API section, or the technical, or even the training program also connects to this documentation. And more specifically, here is the community documentation. And I mentioned that one of the things we cared about was a consistent voice and user-focused messaging. And so for this page, for example, the community page, this is the first page you see when you get to the community documentation. And so it's a welcome message, and then all of the questions are directed at the user. So how do I get started? Where can I get help? What if I have more questions? And the goal for us is to create modular documentation 2.0. So anyone who comes to this can easily find help, get information, and can easily adopt modular. So this is just a sneak peek into some of the work we've done. And so for next steps, as it has to do with the documentation, for PI 15, we'll be focusing on migrating the API specification docs to the view press, which is where the new documentation is. And of course, that includes cleaning it up, structuring it in line with the defined architecture, and deploying it. And then another thing that's a priority for us for PI 15 is creating a community guide for contributing. So most of the work has been central to us, but I think it's important to be able to open it up to the community so the community can start contributing to it. So creating a guide is one of the things we will be looking at for PI 15. And then, like I mentioned in one of the earlier slides, we have a getting started section. So for right now, it's pretty much placeholder pages. But the goal is to get that integrated with Sandbox and with demos, and to develop a lot of content on those pages. And then the final thing for us as part of next steps will be to set up auto deployment of the documentation. Right now, it's a bit manual. And so when you push changes to a branch, it doesn't deploy automatically. So we will be prioritizing trying to get that to be done automatically. And with that, I will be handing over to Luis, who's going to talk more about Sandbox. Thank you.
Great, thanks, Uduak. Yeah, this has been great to follow and see kind of like the new vision for documentation. So awesome work, and I'm looking forward to being able to share that with the wider audience. So as I heavily hinted at earlier, we're also doing a lot of work on an emergent sandbox environment. And as I pull my slides up, I just want to kind of set the scene a little bit. Now, I'm just trying to remember the layout of my slides. I think the first thing that when we think of Sandbox, I think I've said this before, but I'll say it again. It's a perfect word because it means so many things to so many different people that you say Sandbox in your head and Sandbox in my head means something completely different. It's one of those lovely overloaded terms that that tend to kind of happen in our industry. So your sandbox is probably not my sandbox. Maybe this is your sandbox. Maybe this is my idea of a sandbox. Look how peaceful and nice that looks like. I would just love to like lie down in the sand and like mess it all up. And then rake it back nicely as well afterwards. Maybe your sandbox looks like this. It's like a lot more messy than the first two examples of a sandbox. So when we're saying sandbox, we're talking about, well, many things, but what I want to kind of talk about is a framework that we've been developing to talk about this within the ModuLoop organization and the ModuLoop community. And this is one I think we're pretty happy with, but like this isn't set in stone. This can change. There's nuance here that I'm obviously leaving out. And there's probably something I'm going to say wrong that someone will correct me on, and by all means, please do. I don't know everything. So we're thinking about a ModuLoop open source sandbox in kind of these three different tiers. Tier one, actually, I'm really glad Uduak went first because we got to see tier one, which was a documentation platform. Also, it's kind of getting started guides, host Modular Loop. Here's how you deploy Modular Loop yourself. Here's some tools community provides for you to get up and running with Modular Loop. We're also thinking about tier one, like demos and videos could live in there, and obviously linking through to our training program. So these are existing, there's a combination here of existing resources that we've built, ones that we're revamping, like the documentation, and this kind of lives in what we call it, I'd like to call like a tier one level of, I mean, I guess this isn't even really a sandbox, but tier one thing for helping onboard people to the community. The second tier, actually I'll talk about the third tier, then I'll come back to the second one. Third tier is a customized, ready to go, dedicated Motion Loop environment. We're thinking about, there's maybe a few different people out in the community that have approached us to say, hey, we want this kind of thing. We want to test out Modular Loop. We want to do pilot with Modular Loop. We need a proper deployment of Modular Loop so that we can do a proper pilot, or we can test out and learn more about Modular Loop. Maybe they can embed their own scheme rules into that, and that's not really a publicly available thing that the community can provide, and it's not really something that we do necessarily. Maybe other implementers might do this for us. I know some of them do. You could see this maybe as a value-added service, as a part of the sales cycle to Modular Loop. But really, so those are two extremes, right? There's the onboarding guides, documentation stuff, and then there's you've got your own dedicated Modular Loop switch running at wherever you want it to be, and you've got it tailored and set up with oracles, when data coming in exactly as you need it for your deployment. Now, Modular Loop is so many things. From the very get-go in the Modular Loop community, one of the things that I've been passionate about is how do we make it easy for people to get started? My initial goal was like, what's a one-click Modular Loop deployment? And I think in many ways, we're still working on that. And there's a few different people in the community working on those ideas, my dad included, which is kind of weird, but that's cool. And that's the beauty of this open source community. But what if there was a no-click solution? What if there was just a sandbox that's running that you can just call, that there's APIs up and running, ready to go. They're demonstratable. You can hit the try it out button, and we're going to show you a try it out button in a second. And then that's what tier two is. That's what we're doing with the Modular Loop open source sandbox here. That's a publicly available, very generic Modular Loop deployment. It's vanilla as vanilla gets. It makes no guarantees about your data. You might register a DFSP in there, and tomorrow it might disappear. Who knows? There's going to be pre-populated data. We've already got support for one, the Misden Oracle, but we're working on others. This is the model that we've chosen to go with to support the Apex hackathon that we were talking about earlier. Is a pretty generic Modular Loop deployment. Maybe behind the scenes, there's not even a Modular Loop switch running. Maybe it's just a testing toolkit instance, and we'll talk about that in a second, perhaps. Or maybe there is a Modular Loop switch running, but there's simulators on both ends, and it's very opinionated about the type of test data that you kind of send in to get results out. Now, we do see the need for very basic access controls, stuff like making sure that we can moderate or rate limit. And then there's also talk about how do we demonstrate some of the other Modular Loop features, like our security model. How do you do mutual TLS? That's an open question. How do you show JWT without making it really, really hard for people to understand those sorts of things? And maybe not most importantly, but very importantly, tying back to some of the presentations yesterday, is how do you have support for business operations and show stuff actually working here? And there's been a lot of work, and I'm excited to see some of the contributions coming back upstream that we can tie into this environment. So, all right, enough rambling on this slide. Let me ramble on the next slide. I think I probably talked about this already. So actually, no, I haven't. So what we envision, the sandbox is a generic Modular Loop deployment that is publicly available. Now, a part of that deployment is what we're calling the Modular Loop Developer Portal. And this ties in pretty heavily to some of our I guess what I'm trying to say is there's a bit of crossover here between the efforts in this developer portal, and I'm going to show you it in a second, and the documentation or the training program or the demos stuff. So we need to be careful with how we tie these pieces together and make sure we do it right. But my concept, and the one that I've been working on with Leslie Ann as well, of the developer portal is the developer portal can just be deployed alongside any Modular Loop deployment. You could deploy it and give it a bunch of configuration to pre-fill some documentation, some fields, such that out of the box, it talks to a live Modular Loop sandbox that you might have deployed. So we're kind of thinking about how this works. We're not 100% sure what it looks like, but this is the current approach that we're taking. One really important thing is that we're going to have, we currently do have, and we want to keep having, copy pastable curl snippets. So when you are coming along to Modular Loop and you come to the developer portal, you can see an example of, oh, how do I do a party lookup request, or how do I use the scheme adapter to initiate a transfer. You can get some sensible example data, and you can copy and paste it into your command line, or code it into your demo that you're building, and it just works. It has use cases, integration guides, and sample code. So that kind of ties into URLs that work out of the box and these copy pastable code snippets. Curl is a command line utility for calling URLs or making API calls, for those who are not well acquainted with the command line. As I said earlier, pre-populated with basic data, sensible defaults, users that are already registered in oracles, simulated DFSPs that are already set up. We've got a lot of this stuff already that we've previously built, and really we're polishing it up for the current Apex hackathon effort that we talked about earlier, and then hopefully releasing it to the broader community and integrating it in with some of the other efforts. There's a full roadmap here. I don't think we need to talk about it here. Maybe there'll be a chance in a breakout session. I don't know if we're doing a breakout session for this, but we will be doing a planning session next week or the week after to get some more input. We have been trialing a new tool called Coda, and this is aiming to be a little bit more product-y, person friendly than some of the GitHub stuff. So trying to do a bunch of planning here and then move it across into GitHub epics and issues as it becomes real development work. So I'll let you play around with Coda and have a look in your own time. I'll link back to it in just a second as well. But really, okay, so what is the Sandbox? It's a deployment of Modular Loop, an opinionated, simple deployment of Modular Loop. It makes no guarantees about your data, and it lets you get up and running quickly. So as we teased earlier, we can go to sandbox.modularloop.io and have a look at what we've got here. Now, there's a lot of dead links. There is things that you're not going to like on here. By all means, please let me know. There's maybe the way that I've written things isn't great. I'm not a technical writer. Uduak is a technical writer. So once he's done with his documentation, he can help me over here. But what I want to kind of draw your attention to is a couple things. We have getting started guide. We have a Sandbox overview, which tells you what are the simulators that are running, what are the endpoints that you can call, who are the DFSPs, who are the users that the DFSPs have registered, and what are the APIs that we support. Now, like I said, this is all in flux. This is heavily in beta. And what we're really trying to do here is make it as simple as possible for someone to come to this opinionated Modular Loop deployment and self-service, get everything they need to get done and learn about Modular Loop kind of at their own pace and see it working in real time. So one of the things, let me just check where I am in my slides. Yeah, one of the things that I did want to demonstrate quickly, and this is not currently live, but I'm working on it at the moment, is is using is deploying the third-party APIs and making API calls from inside this this developer portal environment. As I was saying, copy pastable also to the command line. So what we have here is a number of APIs available. And this is, we kind of broken them down into synchronous and asynchronous. Oh, sorry, Zoom isn't liking me to mouse over, but synchronous and asynchronous APIs. So thinking about what we have deployed in this environment here is not only the merge loop core switch with its asynchronous APIs, both the FSP IOP and the third-party API, but we have also deployed scheme adapters or which work to make kind of those APIs simplified. So make those asynchronous APIs into synchronous APIs. So what we have here is an example of the rendered documentation for the third-party scheme adapter. So this is the scheme adapter that a PISP who wants to integrate with Moduloop. This is what they could potentially call to build a demo. Now, this is the auto-generated documentation from our specification files. And what I want to show you is that it works and that you could build a demo or start building a demo just using this examples that we have right here, these examples we have right here. Now, this is test data. Like I said, this isn't always going to be nice and pretty and complete, but it's a start. So for example, someone in a hackathon could come along to this page. They could probably look at a use case guide, say, oh, how do I do third-party initiated payments? Okay, now let's learn more about the third-party APIs. I think this link isn't to the right place, but let's do a third-party payment using the third-party API. Or hang on, oh, actually, so I'll use a different example. I'll use an example that I've implemented. That's a good idea, Lewis. So how do we link an account? We want to link, first of all, the first thing we need to do when we're linking an account is look up the accounts that the user has told us. The user has told us which DFSP they use, and then they've given us an identifier that they use to log in with that DFSP. And we need to look up a list of accounts for them to select which account do I want to link with. So they can come here, they can look at the linking accounts API call, they can read the documentation is used to retrieve the list of potential accounts available for linking. So in this example, let's say the user puts in DFSP A as their DFSP, and the user puts in their username 1234, and we can try out this API call. And here we go. We have a curl command, which is talking to our lab environment. And then we have a response of what it is that the lab sends back, and that's the list of 2 accounts here. So we don't need to talk too much about this, but what I wanted to show you is just the ease of integrating and getting a demo up and running when you have these type of tooling available for newcomers in the community. Let me come back to my presentation now, and I'll try and make it full screen if I can present. Maybe I'll need to reshare. So we're working really hard on this concept. We're working really hard, especially on getting the 3 PPI or PISP stuff in here and getting that use case that Leslie Ann was talking about, the G2P payments. This is the kind of dashboard that Leslie Ann's worked really hard on getting for specifically the Sandbox effort within this greater work stream. I don't know how much I can talk to a lot of this stuff, but really our objective right now, and we're laser focused on that, is we have 1 month to support the Apex hackathon and to get everything working from the 3 PPI perspective to make that happen. This is our roadmap, our further roadmap for the Sandbox efforts. And like I said earlier, you can go to that coder page. I'll post a link if Leslie Ann hasn't already. I'll post a link for how you can look at that, and really, yeah, you can go and start here with the kind of the Sandbox team knowledge base. I'm just conscious of time. Sam, how am I going? Have I got another few more minutes to ramble on here?
No, you're good. I'll just take 5-10 minutes. Yes.
Okay, no worries. Yeah, no, I'll just be a few more. What I wanted to talk about was just this one slide here. There's a lot of work that's been going on in different places around sandbox efforts. There's the stuff that we've used for previous hackathons that we're kind of rejigging and extending. There's the IAC work that the Modusbox guys are working on, and payment manager stuff. There's the Mythos Lab environment. I know that Cybrin also have their own demos working. There's, as I said earlier, the business ops framework, which is hopefully going to give us some really pretty looking things that actually show a real switch working that aren't just API calls. And I'm sure there's so many more. Each of these things have stuff that we want to bring into this tier 2 environment that we're talking about. And that's an open question I have to everyone out in the community is how do we work better together on this? I think one of the things that that I want to see is kind of convergence to a certain extent on these environments. I know that there's a lot of stuff already happening. I've been talking to Ed and Isfan for a while about integrating with their environment. I know we've been talking also with the IAC guys about how do we get this deployed for the Rwanda environment, and that's on our roadmap as well. But I just want to call it out here and say we need to kind of break down these silos, to quote Leslie Ann, and bring these pieces together. Now, that hopefully should make you think, how can I contribute and how can I get involved, or how can I bring in, maybe I've got a thing that I can see would work really well in this tier 2 environment that we're building, and I want to help you guys get started with that, or I want to at least point you to where you can do that. Now, the first thing is come to our Sandbox knowledge base, and I'll ask Leslie Ann, if she hasn't already, to post the link in the Pathable site, and go to the Start Here page, because that is, it says Start Here, you can't miss it. We've got a bunch of other things that we can use your help with. We're doing regular releases to that developer portal, and I'll be writing release notes for things that I would like feedback on specifically, or just generic feedback is also useful. Run through the user guides. Let me know if they make any sense to you, or test it out. Try and build a demo, or help with our designs. I'm not a designer. I'm good at critiquing bad design, but I'm not like good at making good design. So we can always use help kind of building that design language as we go. So and that runs into my next presentation, which was earlier. So I think that's all I've got. Thank you, everyone. I look forward to continued discussions, and I'm going to hand over to my esteemed colleague, Sam.
Thanks for that generous introduction, Louis.
I don't think so. I think it's understating it.
This is going to be quick, I think. Let me quickly share my screen. Can you see it?
Yep, all good.
Thank you. To give some context quickly, this PI, I was hoping, Simeon, maybe you can do that, but this PI, there were 4 project teams on the Mojulu Community Council. Thank you, Simeon and Mojulu Foundation, for setting that up. We saw the documentation workstream or project teams update, and then Sandbox. The 2 others were Community Council onboarding strategy and tools, and then the last one was about community events and community in general, I think. So this is about the 3rd one of those 4. Moving forward, the Community Council also voted to merge both the Community Council onboarding strategy and tools and Sandbox, because that seemed like a sensible way to go forward and convert it into a work stream. This, Luis, you mentioned breaking down silos or avoiding silos. I think that is what we want to highlight during this presentation as well. We look at the goals and motivations. We like to talk about persona that we've identified as part of this project team and the Community Council in general, where we work, current status of some of the gaps we identified, and then roadmap. So there were four questions that we asked as part of this. What problem are we solving? And then look at how this is going to be a win-win for both contributors and the community as well. and then a definition of done. So we want to ease things that we've discussed here, make the entry point to the community be very easy and streamlined, give a good opportunity. For example, in the documentation update, we saw how it should be very easy for new community members to come on board and understand what Moduloop does and look at the area that they are interested in, find information from that. So that's what we want to do here, lower the barriers of entry for new contributors in general, not just developers, contributors, and help them get excited to contribute, enriching both their careers and lives, and also Moduloop in the process. And the other one was to come up with good demonstrations. We saw a good one in Sandbox, but that was this is a high level goal to get good demonstrations for use cases beyond P2P. A few minutes ago, we also saw the settlements demo, and we'd like to get demos for things like others we discussed, merchant-based transactions, bulk payments, transaction requests and PISP, things like that. Then review those with the product council, other things to make sure that this is ready to use. So the team for onboarding strategy and tools we have listed here. Thanks to everyone that contributed heavily, participating in meetings, and directly and indirectly contributing to this as well. So the original high-level list of persona identified were participants, builders, funders, governance, influencers, but those were too many things. I mean, we cannot cater to all of those persona during this PI. So for PI 14, we picked up 4. The group voted to prioritize 4 persona, which are subgroups under these high-level persona: hub operators, contributors in general, funders, and innovators. So as part of that, what we wanted to do was we wanted to brainstorm various issues that the current newcomers and onboarding members are facing. So for that, we had some experiences shared by Cybrin and Montreal out of Singapore, and World Bank, and participants from other entities who are trying things out with the Moduloop ecosystem. So our goal there was we meet weekly once and brainstorm issues and how we can address those. Thanks to everyone who contributed, sharing the issues that they face. For example, Stefan from Cybrin faced issues that their team of developers faced, and that really helped us. And we'll see how this life cycle goes from identifying the gaps till where they are fulfilled. So that's what we try to do here: identify gaps in the current processing tools for onboarding, and then document and prioritize these issues, creating backlog for these issues, and then making sure that all the work streams that are working in Moduloop ecosystem are aware of this. For example, if there is a work stream that is working on a related topic, we'd like to reach out to that work stream and see if they can address that. For example, I think I'll mark this one here to highlight what we were able to accomplish. So how to set up Moduloop? Stefan mentioned it would be nice to have a demonstration of how to set up Moduloop. We actually had to do this multiple times, where we went to have a lot of sessions with several team members from all across, from various different companies. Let me get rid of my annotation quickly. Sorry. And we had to do individual meetings with them to identify their issues and then debug and resolve that. So we thought this is a scalable way to do that. How to set up Moduloop. We covered that in the code V1 presentation as well. We now have that recording. There is a demonstration now. There are guides now showing how to set up Moduloop. So this is broken down into very simple steps, 3 small videos. So this is what we're looking at: identify a gap, document, prioritize, backlog, and work with the various existing work streams to fill that gap. Now, Stefan agreed and liked that approach, and confirmed that he was actually also able to review that and confirm that it's looking good. The guides are looking good, so we incorporated that feedback. That's what we want to apply for other gaps we identified as well. So on the left, we are seeing 7 issues that we've currently documented and prioritized. I'll go to the next slide to quickly show where we are with that. So how to set up Moduloop is done. The items number 2 or 3 are in development or in progress. Using the testing toolkit, we saw now not just the P2P scenario record, but also settlements. So we are in the process of creating more scenarios, even smaller ones: how to onboard a DFSP, how to close a settlement window, things like that. and release them along with the default version or just a one-click version of testing toolkit. And we'd like to get feedback to see if that addresses that gap. Similarly, in some of our previous presentations, we talked about the issues that with the longer names. And there's also a task in GitHub DevOps Open about renaming GitHub repositories so that they're more meaningful and that they follow some uniform standards, so that even by looking at the name, we can gather some information on what it does, and whether it is a service or a library, whether it's a project repository, things like that. And so that will help new members of the community who are just onboarding to identify services that they want to work on, search the repositories and things like that. So this is something that is in progress as well. So Luis, Miguel, and I work along with Pedro are working on the standards. This is approved by the DA recently as well. And once that is done, it will be a breaking change. So we also talked about it coming up with the V14 of Mojulu, but this is in development or in progress. And then there were more recently, we identified a couple of things as well. Actually, in the first presentation today from ThinkServer's, Thin mentioned issues about core banking solutions. So for example, concepts of reservation in banks. So that's a relatively not so widely used concept there. Or how does Mojulu work when FSPs go offline for the night or for the weekend? Or how does the two-step transfer work? So these are some of the questions that recently come up in the community, especially as we are dealing with more and more FSPs and more markets. So Michael proposed that we have a FAQ page addressing some of the compatibility issues of Mojulu with other payment systems. For example, if Mojulu, we need these steps in Mojulu, this is the pattern that the transfer works. And based on our experience so far, what we've seen, it will be good to have an FAQ page so that everyone who is trying to integrate, every DFSP is trying to integrate with the Mojulu system, they don't have to reinvent the wheel. I think that will be very useful. We'll work in the next API on that. And then a quick start guide for hub operator. One thing I also want to touch on is there's a lot of good content on Mojulu training program. Everyone I spoke to, especially people from MAS, World Bank, and even Cybrin, agreed that MTP has helped them a lot, has great good content. And I think there is a recent course coming out. Maybe someone from MTP team can correct me if I'm wrong, but there is a recent hub course coming on hub operators as well and tech ops. That will be really helpful. But even outside of that, we want to have documentation as a quick start guide, a landing page for hub operators, or an entity that wants to run a switch on what are the resources that they need to look at. Thank you, Liz, for suggesting this. So these are things we added to our backlog, and we'll continue to work on that. I provided a link at the bottom where you can look at the issues. It will point to, it will show our issues that I've showed here at the left. So it will show the epic and some of the issues that are currently added. And if you have any gaps that you identified, please reach out and we'll discuss it in the community council meeting or in the project team meeting and prioritize that as well. So our goal is to, permitting time, energy, and team members, want to continue working on that, address the gaps that we currently identified. Achieving, I think, our goal and mission of making the onboarding process smooth for various personnel, not just developers, but also hub operators, regulatory bodies, and other entities like that. There is an epic on GitHub which you can use, which captures all these issues and contains links to the sub items, which are stories as well. And here are the Slack channels that you can use to join and have discussion on these gaps or other issues. ML onboarding sandbox and a sandbox developer portal API docs, which Leslie Ann and Luis have mentioned and are managing. So we want to unify into a single channel going forward, but those are the channels for now. That is it from me for now. Simeon, anything you'd like to add or Luis?
No, I just want to thank you all, Luis, Udo. If any of you guys have any last comments, and checking through the chat, if there are any conversations. I don't see any questions.
Simeon, I've been keeping an eye on chat quite a lot, so I just wanted to say what's going on in chat a little bit. I think I can hear a real energy for this is the right problems to be solving and we need feedback loops. But what we also need to not do is forget the fact that we have, yes, Sandbox for demos. Then you get on into, oh, I'm a developer for a hub operator and I want to learn about this. Let's go deeper. Let's read some GitHub documentation about this. And then we have the training program. And then maybe we have feedback loops because we've got a new adopter who's actually embraced all this content and discovered it's inaccurate or not deep enough or not asking this question. So we need to be agile within this pillar of work, and we need to make sure that we all work as a team. I think that is consistently the story I'm hearing here in the chat.
Yeah, thanks for that input. Just reading through some of the comments. And Jane notes the Hub 209 TechOps course on the training program is also on its way. Thanks for that. Yeah. So unless there's any last comments, Leslie, Sam, Lewis, or Udwak, I think we can close it there.
I think this is still a big ask to the community to say we need reviewers. We need to know if the content's accurate, not just read it. Is it helpful? Is it accurate? Feedback, give us feedback, and help us make it better. That will happen because of the fact that the community is growing and the content is either proven valuable or it isn't. Let's improve it together rather than working in vacuums. So it's still always that call for you're part of this community. It's not a vendor driven thing.
Yep, got it. Sam, sounds like you wanted to jump in as well.
Thank you, Simeon. Yeah, I think by the next PI we should be in good shape, but I think we need to establish that feedback loops, and this is where really I think contributions will help us, because we cannot know all perspectives and what core banking solutions need. So
and I would even suggest even a mini scrum of scrums for this set of product owners, which I guess is what everyone here in this group is, to make sure that they are singing from the same mission.
Yeah. All right, Lewis, any last thoughts?
No, just to yeah, say I agree and let's do it. Sounds good.
Awesome. Well, thank you, everybody. We'll close it 9 minutes early. At the top of the hour, we'll go to our last session of the day, which I believe is the OSS FRMS fraud risk management solution actual by the Next Tego folks. That's Justice and Darshan. So we will see you there at 3 p.m. UTC. Thank you, everybody.